Hello, in this first podcast of the Food and Agriculture Unit, we're going to be looking at food security. Our learning objectives are to first define food security, and we should also be able to differentiate between malnutrition and undernourishment, and we should also be able to understand the obstacles to food security in both the developing and the developed world. And I'm going to start off by showing you Somalia in summer of 2011. Somalia is in the Horn of Africa, and it's the location of the movie Black Hawk Down. A famine is a situation that occurs where there is an acute food shortage, and it's accompanied by a lot of social disruption and a lot of loss of life. And one of the reasons why this occurred is because there have been decades of conflict in Somalia. The country really hasn't had a government for years, and this is combined with the worst drought in 60 years. And parts of this country are controlled by terrorist groups that are aligned with Al-Qaeda, and these groups have killed aid workers, and that made aid workers very reluctant to come to bring food and other types of aid to the victims of the famine. And tens of thousands of people die from malnutrition in this famine. Food security means that in a given area, every person has daily access to enough nutritious food to have an active and healthy life. Today, there's enough food produced to provide food security to everybody. But if you look at this map over here, you'll notice that there is no place on this planet where everybody has food security. There are places where you'll find some hot spots, like over here is Somalia, which we're talking about, and the whole area around there's more than 35% of the population there does not have food security. There are other areas like the United States where it's less than 5%, but even so, there are people in the United States where they don't have food security. Worldwide, 870 million people, or 1 in every 8 person, is chronically hungry. Now, for the causes of food insecurity, the root cause is poverty, because while there isn't enough food for everybody, not everybody can afford to eat 2,200 kilocalories every day. There are other causes of food insecurity as well, and we saw that in Somalia. There's political upheaval, there's corruption, and there's war, and primarily those interfere with the transportation of food. There's also a catch-22 to food insecurity, that once a person has food insecurity, once they are chronically hungry, they cannot work their way out of that condition because they're often too weak and hungry to work. So here I have a puzzle for you. Here we have 2 meals that you can get here in New York. One is a Big Mac meal. Costs $8. The other is one that you can order from a local supermarket. And this is one that you mostly prepare for yourself. One thing I did to sort of make it a little bit easier in putting it together is that the chicken there, while it's not pre-cooked, everything's done for you except for putting it in the oven. And that's $16. And these are decisions that are put before people every day. One meal is less expensive and the other meal is healthy. What would a poor person choose? Now we come to nutrition versus hunger. Now hunger is the lack of basic food for energy and meeting nutritional. Malnutrition is the lack of essential nutrients, which are amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. So if someone has malnutrition, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not getting enough calories, though frequently they are not. It just means that they don't have a balanced diet, and it's so out of balance that they are suffering from it, that they are sick from it. Undernourishment means there's a lack of adequate food energy, that they're not getting enough calories. And then we come to the opposite of hunger, and that's obesity, and 1/4 of the United States population is obese. Getting back to malnourishment, there are several different types, and here's a main one that we don't see all that often in the United States, but used to be here, and this is iodine deficiency. And iodine is an essential nutrient that is needed for the synthesis of a endocrine hormone called thyroxine. and that regulates metabolism. And iodine is frequently found in seafood and crops that are grown in iodine-rich soils. So if someone doesn't have those in their diet, then they have a problem. They're not getting enough iodine, and what's going to result from that is they're going to end up with a goiter, which is a swollen thyroid gland, and also they're going to end up with not having a finely regulated metabolism. What's basically going to happen to someone who has iodine deficiencies, if they're a child, the growth is going to be stunted, and they end up being mentally retarded. The reason why we don't have it in the United States, even if you don't eat a lot of fish, is because when you buy salt, hopefully you are buying iodized salt, and iodized salt contains that nutrient. Another type of malnourishment is something called marasmus, and this is caused by a diet that's low in calories and in protein. Because the cheapest foods that people can buy, and that unfortunately the poorest of the poor it's all they can afford, are things like wheat, rice, and corn. These are very high in carbohydrates and very low in protein. With lacking in the protein, it's very easy for them to become sick, and they'll end up with developmental problems. They'll have physical developmental problems, and they will also become mentally retarded too. Another problem is not just malnourishment, or also is overnutrition. As I said before, 1 in 4 people are overweight, and you can look at this chart here, and this sort of will tell you your body mass index, and you just look here on the bottom and you find how tall you are, and you match that with your weight and see where the two lines match, and that will tell you if you're underweight, if you have a healthy weight, if you're overweight, or if you are obese. That will only work if you're 18 years or older, so it won't work for you right now, so don't really go by it. The reason why so many people are overweight is because so many people eat 1/3 more calories than they need and also get too little exercise. If you go to, frequently you go to a restaurant, and the portions that we get are much larger than the portions that we need. So our idea of what we need our ideas of how much food are in a meal is much higher. I mean, that's one reason why we overeat. There are other reasons, and that's one reason why we overeat. There are other reasons too, like plenty of people, they eat from stress or other things. And it's also what we eat too. We eat too much meat, we eat too much salt, too much sugar, too much saturated fat, and we eat too little fiber and too little vitamins. And that can cause quite a few problems. It can cause diseases. It can cause hypertension, heart attacks, stroke, osteoarthritis, respiratory problems, and some cancers. And about 300,000 people in the United States die every year from problems related to obesity. And that's not too far behind the number of people who die every year from smoking. And if we go back to the question I posed earlier, this brings out a catch-22 for people who are in poverty. They're given a choice here. You have a meal that's healthy and expensive, and a meal that is not healthy and inexpensive. People who are in poverty, they will most likely choose the Big Mac meal over the marinated chicken meal. And that paradoxically means that they're people who food-wise are food insecure, and they are obese. So it's bizarre that food insecurity can cause obesity by forcing poor food choices. And for those of us who are obese, we try not to be, and we end up spending more than $50 billion every year trying to lose weight. Now we come to our concluding questions. And number 1, what is food security? Number 2, what is its root cause? Number 3, what is the difference between undernourishment and malnourishment? And number 4, how can poverty contribute to obesity? That concludes this podcast, and I will see you in class tomorrow.